Hi everyone, I'm Andy Neal and this is a Final Cut Pro quick tip. Today I'd like to talk about making custom transitions for your sequences. Occasionally when I'm editing, I'll come to a point in my sequence where I want a transition that's a little bit more than just your basic dissolve or wipe. There's a neat little trick that will allow you to create your own transitions and customize them specifically to your project. I start off here with a couple of clips that I got from stock footage companies. First one is from Artbeats, the second one is from Pond 5, and I want to do a wipe between these two clips. So start by selecting the edit point or placing the playhead right on that edit point, and then go up to Effects, Video Transitions, QuickTime, Gradient Wipe. Now if I scrub through this gradient wipe here, it looks fairly unimpressive at this point. It just looks like a basic edge wipe going from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. But if I double click it, what you'll see is this little box here in the matte parameter. This is an image well. What the image well does is it takes the information in a still image and uses that to determine the wipe. And I'll explain how this works with a little demonstration. I have this image here that I created in Motion. It's just a radial gradient where it's white in the center and black on the edges. So I'm going to double click the gradient wipe again and drag this circle gradient into the image well. Now if I scrub through my gradient wipe, you'll see that it's no longer an edge wipe from the bottom to the top, but it's now a circle wipe. And if I crank up the edge blur, it's a nice soft circle wipe. The gradient wipe takes the luminance values in the image and it begins the transition at the brightest parts of the image and ends the transition at the darkest parts. Now if I apply a different kind of image like this one here, which is pure white and pure black, the gradient wipe will react slightly different. So I'm going to just drag this into the image well, and I'm going to render this so that you get an idea how it plays in real time. Okay, so now what we have is a wipe that will wipe the white part of the frame immediately and then pause until it gets to the end of the transition where it wipes the bottom half. We're going to use this behavior in our custom transition that we're creating. I'm going to select the gradient and delete it, and then I'm going to park on the very first frame of the skyline footage. What I want to do is create a black and white image that I can use in the image well, and I want it to be the shape of the skyline so that I can wipe just the buildings on first and then the sky. Now normally if I was going to create an image, I would open up Photoshop to do this, but not everybody has Photoshop, so I'm going to show you how to do it in Motion. It's actually fairly easy. I'm going to right click on the skyline footage, choose Send to Motion Project. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this Wipe, and make sure to deselect the Embed Motion Content button. Okay, we do not want that embedded. And then hit save. What that should do is open Motion up right for you and give you your clip that you sent from Final Cut. Hit Shift Z to fit to window, and then open my layers pane. Twirl open the group so that I can see my skyline video. Now to separate the buildings from the sky, I need to do this with a mask. So up here on the right in the toolbar, the far right, is the Bezier mask tool. Just select that, and we're going to start making some points in here. But this is kind of an intricate skyline, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit to see it. So Command plus to zoom the canvas in, and then if I hold down the space bar, my cursor will turn into a little hand tool that allows me to reposition the canvas underneath. Then when I release the space bar, it turns back into my Bezier tool. And I'm just going to get started and start making my mask. Now you can be as intricate as you want or as simple and sloppy, and I'm going to be a little sloppy for sake of time, but I want to give the impression of the skyline in this mask. When you get to the end, zoom out with Command minus and just complete the path on the outside of the frame like this. What you should be left with is just the cityscape, and the sky should have disappeared. You can turn off your overlays by hitting Command / to see how well you did your mask, and even go into the inspector here at the top of the mask tab and maybe give it a little bit of a feathering -2 perhaps on the feathering, just to soften it a little bit. Okay, now that we got that part done, now we need to create our gradients. Select the group and then go up here to select the rectangle tool and just draw a rectangle across the whole frame. And we're going to name this Sky. Then duplicate it and name the duplicate City. Okay, deselect the city, and now all we're left with is the sky. Now we need the sky to wipe on last. So to do that, this gradient has to be dark. So go to your Shape tab, and under Fill Mode, change the color to Gradient. Next to the gradient is another drop-down with some presets created by Motion. I want you to find Grayscale and select that. Now we have our black and white gradient, but it's not a radial gradient like I want. Twirl down the gradient, which will give us more parameters that we can affect, and under Type here, change it from linear to radial. Now we have a small radial gradient, but we need it to be much bigger than that. So to make changes to that size of that gradient, click up here in your selection tool, click and hold it down until it reveals the drop down. Choose the one on the bottom, that's the Adjust Item tool, and that'll give you your graphical representation of your gradient. And now I can just put the white side in the center, the black side off to the edge here. Okay, now I said that this gradient needs to be darker, so that means it needs to go from black to sort of a dark gray so that it's the last part of this picture to wipe on. And I want the very last part of the picture to be the center here. So I'm going to swap position of these 2 points. Just drag one over here, drag the other one over here, and that effectively swaps that position. So now we have the black in the center and the white on the edge. Now we need this white to be a much darker color, so I'm going to click on the box in the gradient and then click on the color here and just use this slider here to adjust the brightness to something less than half gray. So I'm going to maybe go to about that. Now I have my dark to gray gradient for my sky. Now I need to dress my city. Turn the city layer back on and then drag the Bezier mask onto the city so that what we're left with is a cutout of our skyline in pure white. Then select the city layer and do the same thing that we did before. Change the fill to gradient, change the gradient to grayscale, and then change the type of gradient to radial. And we can't really see it right now, so let's grab our selection tool, our edit item tool, and we can move our gradient down here to where it's showing the city. Now this gradient, since we want it to be the first thing that wipes on, we want it to be a very bright gradient. So we want it to start in the center. That's why we want the white part in the center. And around the edges, we want this to be a light gray. So again, I'm going to select the dark box this time, click on the color, and now I'm going to bring the slider up till it's north of the halfway point. What this should do now is the wipe should start here and wipe the whole city on, then pause for a brief period of time, and then wipe the sky on. So hopefully that's what we're going to get. Now we're done. We just simply need to export this as a still frame. So go to File, Export, and instead of where it says QuickTime Movie, change this to Current Frame, and you can leave everything else default. And then just, we call it wipe, and we just hit Export. So I'll close that out. And then once I've exported it, I need to flip back to Final Cut Pro and then import this as an image. So I'm just going to hit Command I to import, find my wipe.tif, choose it, and if I double click it, I have a nice little custom gradient wipe. So now in my timeline I need to go add that gradient effect again, so go to Video Transitions, last gradient wipe. Drop it right in there, double click, and then drag the wipe that we created into the image well. I can once again adjust the edge blur to make it a little softer. I'll render it and see how it looks. On comes the city and then out wipes the sky. And there we are, a custom wipe designed specifically for the type of footage that I'm using. I'm Andy Neal, and this has been a Final Cut Pro Quick Tip.